Hello and welcome to Pathways Through the Prairie, where we interview North Dakota librarians and library staff, state agency leaders and employees, and interesting North Dakotans. I am State Librarian Mary Soucie, and today I'm joined by the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation Director, also known as DOCR, Colby Braun. Colby has worked in various positions in the DOCR for the last 15 years and has been in law enforcement for 28 years. He was appointed to the director position by former Governor Burgum in January of 2024. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Colby, tell us, what are the core mission and priorities of the North Dakota Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation? That's a mouthful. Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Yeah. Our mission it's transforming lives, influencing change, and strengthening community. And when you think about, we've got about 10,000 people that are underneath our care and custody within the department. So whether it's kids in the youth system, pro and probation, pretrial services, and then also our prisons. And oftentimes people just think of DOCR as the prison, but there's people throughout every community across the state. And so when you think about transforming lives and influencing people, I mean, that's really all we have. People made a choice. There's a victim behind every crime. And so as people end up in our system, it's really trying to find that path for them to make change and to make different choices. So all of us, we're all in this mission together to try to influence that. And then really it comes down to me, the biggest thing is community. We have to build community no matter where we're at, because it takes a lot of support. Because people come to us generally at the lowest point in their life. And so being able to support them through that, find different choices, and really lead them to some level of success. And as we all know, as we go through our own journeys, we have lots of lessons that we all learn. And so really we're there to help people through those, so really the most difficult times, and then hopefully they're celebrating the wins with them. Mm-hmm. And then when we think of just about prisons, 95% of the people are for sure coming back to our communities, 97%. And sometimes you'll hear the two different numbers. That 2% is the people with a life sentence, but they have an opportunity for parole. So we know that 95% are coming back. Most likely 97% are going to have an opportunity to come back to our communities. And so when you think about our vision is a healthy and productive neighbor, a safe North Dakota. The reason that's so important to me is because when people come to us, it's our job to make them better than how they came in. That's mental health, that's physical health, that's dental health. And then it's also teaching skills, so that when they return to us, that they can be a productive person that's giving back to our community. I think of just as a taxpayer, that's the investment that I want, is I want somebody else coming back to be that taxpayer right along with me and being part of our society to really give back.
And so that's kind of the rehabilitation part of corrections and rehabilitation.
Absolutely. And it's, to me, accountability is rehabilitation too, because you're accountable for all your choices. And so whether that's in prison, probation, parole, wherever that lands you, but absolutely, our job is to give those people the opportunity to change. And that's the rehabilitation and truly the corrections piece, because we're all accountable. I mean, I'm sure all of us have stories from the time we were kids to last night, maybe with our spouse, right? So, I mean, but we're accountable to those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's really inspiring to think about the impact that you're having on people who come to you at the worst moment of their life. And instead of just saying, well, you made this bad choice, and now we're putting you behind a cell, and then you're going to stay there. But your team is working to provide them with opportunities so that when they come back to our community, they have the opportunity and the tools to make a better choice.
Yep, absolutely.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
The State Library's vision is providing pathways to knowledge and opportunities. What was your pathway into public service? You've been in corrections, you said, for a long time.
Yeah, so this was definitely not the place that I thought I was landing. I went to school at Dickinson State University, elementary ed degree. I thought I'm going to be an elementary ed teacher, a coach. This is since I was as since probably first grade. I mean, that was my plan. And coming out of college, they're just at that time North Dakota the schools were getting smaller, and so just looking for opportunity. And so a correctional officer position came open at the jail, and I accepted that position. Well, at the time we had federal juveniles there, and so really it was working with kids within the system plus the adult population within the jail. And quickly I learned that really, truly, it wasn't that much different than teaching. You were able to do it throughout a shift as a correctional officer working with people. And I probably always enjoyed folks that are a little bit vulnerable or on the edge. And so it really fit within my persona. And so then as that grew, I mean, I promoted to a case manager. Then when the women's facility in New England opened up, I moved down there with my family. And the whole idea of service, I think at the beginning was more about the accountability piece. But then as I worked with the kids and I began to see how they would come into our facility, they'd be making change, they'd be doing really well, but then as they prepared, as they got closer to that going home, that reentry phase, I saw these kids go from doing really well to just continually decline. So this is a theory, this isn't anything more than that, but my theory is I saw these kids literally coming in at that low point, and for them to be ready and prepared, they almost put themselves at that same point to go back. And that's when I think, for me, all of a sudden it was like, we have got to make some changes here. We have to prepare people for that return to their community, and we have to do it in a way that families are connected, communities are connected, and it's really all about all of that, because if we don't, that person is going back to their community in the memory that they had when they left, and the people are accepting them in the memory that they had when they left, right? So it was that whole piece. And so at the women's facility, that's really where I think it kind of flipped for me a little bit, is I'm like, now I'm working with moms. And the moms are the ones accepting those kids back, right? And so the moms are the ones that really need to be there. So my passion really grew at that point, is how do we make mom well? Because if mom's well, then most likely the kids are well. And if the kids are well, now we're changing generational incarceration. It's not about just one, it's about the next one and the next one and the next one. And I mean, I've been in this business long enough to where I've had grandpa or grandma, mom or dad, son or daughter, and a grandchild that I've seen in the system. And so there's really there can be some huge wins with the success of those first folks coming into the system. And so how do we do that? And I believe that we do that through what we talked about, is really about providing those skills and figuring out a way to reentry that's really focused on small wins that turn into bigger wins.
Sure. What is you said federal juveniles. What does that mean?
So at the time, I mean, right now it's a little bit different, but at the time, the Federal Bureau of Prisons didn't have facilities for juveniles. I don't even know if they do now, but they try to keep kids closer to home. But at that time, we had a contract at the jail in Dickinson, and then Devil's Lake also had a contract. And so these federal juveniles from all over the country, almost all over the world, if they had a federal sentence, they may be placed in any facility similar to what we had in Dickinson with the Bureau of Prisons. And so then those kids would come to us, and we'd work with them and then prepare them to go back to their communities. But they were all under federal sentences. So we had a lot of Native American kids, but then we also had kids that had, drug trafficking across state lines, other things like that would be a federal crime.
Are most of the federal crimes related to drugs? I didn't realize that federal juvenile was that was a thing, I guess.
Yeah. So for them, yes, it would be. I mean, there's going to be a lot of drug trafficking crimes with weapons, and then you also have on the reservation. I mean, if it goes beyond a tribal offense, then the feds would take it. So on the reservations, you end up having a lot more of these kids that end up in the federal system, just because if they murder someone or they have a sex crime, those would end up going above the tribal and most likely landing in the federal
Okay.
system. And so then those kids would come to us.
And how is it different today? You said it's different today than it was when you
So
started.
what they did, I think this was under the Clinton administration, was really trying to get kids closer to home. Because we had kids from Arizona, Hawaii, East Coast, West Coast. We had kids from out of country. And recognizing that they wanted to keep kids within a couple hundred miles. And so it was really about finding contracts, facilities, and places where these kids could be more established there. And so that really, and then not having correctional facilities necessarily as your first place of rehabilitation. Because no matter what, we are an abnormal community at best.
Right. How important is it for a prisoner of any age to be in a facility close to home so that then family can visit or neighbors or, is there a lot of visiting that happens in the prison?
Yeah, so in the prisons, it all depends on. Because no matter what, it's expensive to travel, it's expensive to get there. So but yes, there's visitation, there's contact visitation in all of our facilities. In terms of lots or not, I think it just depends on the person, on the individual. Family that's close, they're generally going to be there, but there's also, when you listen to the guys and the gals talk, as people get into prison, that connection continues to decline. So it's a lot of work, and we know that people's success is about maintaining those connections.
Sure.
The more connections that people lose over time within the facility, the less success that we see people as they return.
Sure, that makes sense. And there was legislation that was passed in the session earlier this year related to moms and babies in prison, wasn't there?
Yeah, so we're building a new women's facility in Mandan. So it's the Youth Correction Center is there currently. We also have 2 cottages that are that a few years ago that we put women in there. It's sight and sound separation between the kids and the women. But so we were able to secure funding for a new women's prison that's currently under construction. I was actually on site yesterday looking at the foundations, and things are looking. It's going to be a hopefully a place of healing and a place of rehabilitation for the ladies. But part of that was having a space where mom and baby could stay. Because I want to say last year, I think there was 11 babies. I say don't quote me, but it's
Sure.
quoted. So, but 11, I think it was 11 babies that were born in custody with us.
Wow.
And so we know that for baby to do well and that bonding time to happen, that it's really, really critical in those first couple of years, but for sure the first 18 months. And so if a lady is going to continue to be with us, the legislation allows for mom and baby to stay there in a nursery type setting for up to 18 months, depending on mom's length of sentence. There's lots of different pieces,
Sure.
her behavior, in her crime, and there's all kinds of things that go into it. But the reality is there's an opportunity now for mom and baby to stay together at the facility. When I was warden of the women's facility, it wasn't just mom that grieved when after the 3 days in the hospital, baby goes somewhere else, mom comes back to prison. It was the whole community that grieved,
Sure.
knowing that baby was going to be gone. So I think even though this might be a little bit difficult to understand from the community when you think about a baby being in a prison, but the reality is it's more about mom and baby, and just forget about what space it is, because if
Sure.
mom and baby are together, baby's going to do better. And then I go back to generational incarceration, right?
Right.
Baby does better in that first 18 months of life. There's a much better chance that they're not going to be needing our care,
Sure.
18 years later.
Is this happening in a lot of states, or is North Dakota sort of leading the way?
No, this has been going on for over 100 years in New York.
Okay.
Right. So this is, I think we're in that 20th. We're kind of in the middle of the pack of
Okay.
states that are doing this. So this is even the policy and the ideas. We stole it. We just reached out to other states, said, "Hey, what do you got?" And they were
Sure.
sending us stuff, and we kind of took what we thought was the best of the
Okay.
best and put that together for our.
I call that networking.
Yeah, I call it stealing.
I call
prison.
it networking. Yeah, that's maybe your field steals, my field networks. That's really funny, Colby. Will that require different training for staff?
Yeah, so it'll be training for staff, and then also, looking at one of the things that over probably the first 20 years of my career, we have all these people living in our facilities, and never once did I think about them as a resource. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but it's the truth. And so one of the things that flipped for me a few years ago when I went through prison fellowship, this warden's exchange, was that I realized that we've got this massive resource just sitting here with us that just is ready to help. So it'll be staff will go through different training, but that it'll also be other ladies that they can also be part of, like a daycare system, and being able to do that. So I think there's some excitement with that.
Mm-hmm. What is the most rewarding aspect of being the director of DOCR?
I think some of the things that really land for me is this many years of being in an administrative role is watching staff come in that like this person has it, and then watching them come in with new creative ideas and watching their career grow and their leadership. So to me, a lot of it is about team development and opportunity. But when you start thinking about the bigger picture, the thing that we went through a major culture shift in about 2015, 2016, and it was really redefining what security looks like. So when I came into corrections, we have what you call static security and dynamic security. Static security is like your locks, your keys, the cameras, the doors, all of that. Well, really, as a correctional officer, when I came into this work, that's what we were. We stood along the wall, we watched what happened, we responded to situations, we went back to the wall, we watched. So really, we were part of that static security. Well, dynamic security is really more of getting to know someone, understanding it. So instead of me waiting and responding, now looks like today you're having kind of a tough day. I'm going to go ask you how things are going, because now maybe that fight won't happen. Maybe that incident won't happen or maybe that suicide won't happen. We'll never know. But the reality is now being able to recognize that there's an issue and I can respond. The other thing is really recognizing people for doing well, and being able to, we'll call them positive behavior reports. So we write people up for doing bad, but we write people up for doing the right thing, right? So we write people up for these doing good things, but I didn't think this was going to work. But correctional officers, as they write people up for doing good, it changes behavior. So where I'm going with all of this is a long way around, but I now hear, almost a decade later, correctional officers explaining to me why and how they do this work. I have correctional officers that are now coming to me explaining how important it is that we know people and that we can respond to them, and how we need to build professional rapport with people to make change in their life. And as they celebrate the wins with people, I never thought that I would see that in my career, because that was never how I grew up. That wasn't how I grew up. But when you have people that have been in this work for 3 to 5 years, and they're already talking about the importance of all this, it's now telling me that we have a strong community focused on the wellness of people, because our job is to send them out better than they came in. And as a correctional officer, instead of just holding people accountable, now my job is that, right? So then you think about parole and probation officers, you think about educators, treatment staff, nurses, doctors, psych. Now you've got this community of 1,000 staff continuing to figure out how do we help these 10,000 people. And I think for me, it's really, really rewarding to know that we're on this mission together, and the mission is actually leading us down that path. And it's been a lot of work, and it started with Director Leanne Birch to our former director, Dave Krabenoff, and now me being able to kind of continue to just move that forward. But for us, when you go through 3 administration changes and knowing that we've all stayed on the same path, I think that's the reward, is knowing that through this whole journey, our leadership has been able to continue. And that's the same going from Governor Burgum to Governor Armstrong. And so then you think about Governor Armstrong saying, recovery and reentry is so important that I'm going to have a person in my cabinet. So with Jonathan Holt, and he put Jonathan in that place, I think it really just reaffirms how important this work is and how important it is to public safety. So that's a long answer, and I apologize.
No,
but hopefully
it's a great answer.
It gives you kind of the journey of my thoughts.
And really inspiring to know that the person who's leading the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation is more focused on wins and celebrations and helping people be better than the way we used to focus on lock the door, throw away the key, and you made one bad choice and now it's going to impact you forever and ever and ever. Instead, we're focusing on, you made a bad choice. How do we help you make better choices when you re-enter society? And that's what we need. Because like you said, 95% will re-enter society, and you want to reduce recidivism or the return to your community.
Yeah, and it's, even recidivism. I mean, I've even begun to look at that differently. And it's certainly something that we all must measure, and it's important. But we all have to be part of it, right? Because if only time in prison was the only thing, that would be like the only reason for my success is that Dickinson State University has done everything for me and nothing else happened, right? So, very, very important, and a very important piece of that. But there was lots of other pieces that's helped me through my life. And so I think it's really recognizing that recidivism it's about that piece, and really, are we giving people the opportunity to change and gain skills? But then it's also, how is the community recognizing and seeing this person? And that's a tough ask. Right. Because this person created harm. And so being able to figure that and navigate through that, I think that's something that we have to work through. And I think the other piece with recidivism is really just let's look at all aspects of health, and how are we doing as a society as people return to us? Are people getting access to medical care? Are they getting access to housing? Are they getting access to employment? Are those things happening? Because it's all of those pieces that I believe roll up into that last figure of recidivism. So it's a much broader thought than just that one measurement. And it's hard because we have between 38, if you go over the last 10 years, between 35 and 40% of the people who return to our communities, they return to prison. The good news is that generally when they come back, it's less violence. It's more for relapse and drug issues, but the reality is it's still a high return rate that we're going to continue to work on and do everything we can to improve that.
So as you were talking about your staff, you mentioned obviously correction officers and probation officers and parole officers, but you also mentioned doctors, and I think you said psychiatrists, and you talked about teachers. I happen to know there's librarians in your system as well. Is there a position that is within your team that you think people would be surprised to learn about, that you have, librarians or psychiatrists or whatever working as part of DOCR? I'll be honest, I was surprised to hear you mention psychiatrists and doctors. I didn't realize that there were doctors on staff. It makes sense when you're dealing with 10,000 people.
Yeah, and so I think when you just think just medical alone, so we've got a whole pharmacy department. We have 2.5 pharmacists, 4 pharmacy techs. We have our correctional health authority with Dr. Gravning, but then we have nurse practitioners, physician's assistants. We have 2 dentists. We have 4 dental assistants. On the behavioral health side, licensed addiction counselors, social workers, psychologists. It's plumbers, electricians. It's truly like when wardens, as we're talking to people, especially new people coming into the system, and if you have a new correctional officer going into a facility, it's really looking at that warden as the mayor, right? So they're running a city. And so what are all the things that you need to run a city? Because that's really what a prison is. When you look on that fence and you drive over and you see it as you're going across the expressway, the reality is that's a small city. And it's not even that small. The last time I looked, I used to go to Century High School and just talk to their criminal justice class. And so I'd look it up every year as I go to the class. And at the very beginning, it was the 50th largest city in North Dakota, the state penitentiary was. Last time I looked, it was 65th. So it was right in there with about the size of Linton.
Okay.
It's about the same size. So when you start thinking about that place, that's how many people live there.
Right.
You know, so it's a fairly large city in the
Right.
sense of North Dakota.
Yeah, that just, it puts everything in a slightly different perspective when you think of it that way and you think of the warden as the mayor. That it just changes things a little bit.
And it's and with those folks, we're responsible for everything. And so any piece of care of a person, you have to think about what would you need in order to care for somebody. The same as you'd care for a child. We have the same responsibility with adults or the kids in the system. And so anything that you would need, you know, and then it's the same thing out in the community with parole and probation officers. We have social workers who are probation officers, parole officers. We work with pretrial services, and this is really upstream, working with the judges and the courts to really better understand that person and take pressure off the jail. So we have officers who are supervising people in the community who would otherwise be in the jail, but as they're on pretrial, they haven't been sentenced yet. We're out there providing support to those folks.
Okay.
And so it's really trying to reduce, as we all know, that there's a lot of pressure on all facilities in the state, whether it's jails or prisons, of being over capacity. We have about 1,000 people right now that are living in our communities with a pretrial officer supervising them to take that pressure off the jails and better inform the courts as sentencing comes.
What's the difference between a jail and a prison?
A jail is really about detention.
Okay.
I mean, so you'll generally have some nurses, maybe a doctor will come on site. Some of the jails have maybe one or two behavioral health people, social worker type person, or trying to connect those services. Within a prison, again, it's all of it. A jail is short-term placement. It's less than a year. Where prison, we have people that have been there for 35, 40-ish years. You know, and that's where they'll be for the rest of their life. And so a jail is really purpose-built just thinking about housing and making sure that they're safe.
Sure.
Where a prison is really, it's all about building up skills and opportunity and both very, very important. Yeah.
What is one thing you want our listeners to take away about DOCR?
I think I've hit on quite a few of those things, but I think when people think about public safety, I believe the general public looks at public safety as removing that person, right? This person is creating harm, removing that person, and so the lack of a person in community is public safety is what I think oftentimes people view it as. I want people to think about the DOCR as the leader in public safety because our job is much more than just removing a person. Our job is about taking that person that comes with whatever experiences they have in their life. And most of the time, it's not the same experience I had in my life. I mean, I tried to apply my life to many of these people that I've worked with over the years, and the reality is I can't.
Sure.
I grew up in Southwest North Dakota on a farm. We worked and we worked, right? I mean, but I was loved. I had a great mom and dad. I had a great family of support. I never had to worry about any of those needs. And I was personally very, very, very blessed with my family and where I grew up. And I think about many of the people that come to us, they don't have that same experience. They've got trauma that I can't even imagine. And so knowing that our job is to really try to work with those people at where they're at and build something else in an abnormal environment of prison, or as a parole officer or probation officer that's a law enforcement officer, but it's also supposed to be a social worker, that's also supposed to connect support services, it's supposed to do all of these things. But I think it's important that the public looks at all of this, and what I hope people see is that public safety is a person that learns a new skill at work. Public safety is getting on the right medications and continuing those medications with health and human services as they return to community. Getting a GED is public safety. Mm-hmm. We know that if a person gets an associate's degree while in prison, almost 0%, it's a little bit higher than 0%, return to prison.
Wow.
So we think about investment. It costs $55,000 a year for a person to be in prison. That's a pretty cheap investment if I know that person is almost at a 0% likelihood to return to prison if they do that. They get their GED, it reduces. People who work at Rough Rider Industries, which is the employment arm of the DOCR, they've got a recidivism rate of about 8%. So we're teaching these people life skills and work skills and preparing them for that. And I think to me, that's public safety. Mm-hmm. And if we can return these people better, and if we as a community can do that together, that's how we continue to really meet that vision of a safe North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really beautiful. And talking about Rough Rider, we have some items here that had been built by Rough Rider, but some of our libraries have worked with Rough Rider, and the quality of the work and the beauty of what gets produced is just, I mean, the quality is just top notch. And so it's really, and it's produced at a price that our small rural libraries can afford new shelving in their library. I'm thinking of Carrington Library, which has worked with Rough Rider a couple of different times, and their children's space is just amazing when you think about this small community that has these beautiful, top-notch quality shelving that's customized to their space and has created such a welcoming environment. And then you think about the folks that created it and where they came from. I think you're meeting your mission. I really do.
Well,
so that's wonderful.
That.
If people want to learn more about DOCR, what should they do? Where should they go?
So we've got a website. Just go on docrnd.gov, I believe, is the website. So, I mean, that's the place to just do research, look at all the different areas, what we're about. There's a public-facing dashboard that gives you an idea of over time, how we've trended, the number of people in our system, the demographics, so it kind of gives you that baseline data. Also, there's another dashboard on there that just talks about how does a person spend their time, and how much time are they spending. And so there's another one that's really focused on the parole board and as they get released. And I think that's a really great resource. We also have a communications director, and my email's on there. And so if there's additional questions that aren't being answered, or if people want tours, if they, like my business, I want to come look at the facility. Where I always land, and the wardens probably get mad at me, but I always say we're going to land on yes. Because the prisons are hidden, right? So one of the things that we learned back in that 2015, 2016 era was recognizing that the prison walls and fences keep everybody in, but guess what? It also keeps the public out.
Right.
And so this is a state resource that people need to understand and be educated about. They need to see what we do. And so we say, please come in, and we'll figure out a way to get people through the facilities, get to see what they want, get to talk to residents, get to talk to the staff. Because I think that's really important because it's not cheap to do the work that we're doing,
Right.
and people need to understand what's happening behind those walls. The last thing that in terms of understanding, and it's from a whole different perspective, is we've got a podcast within the state penitentiary called Chains to Changed podcast.
Okay.
And that's two guys that live in that place that interview people from all over the world, to a guy that's spending time in prison, to people like me. So it's another place that they can just
And where
learn.
can they find that podcast?
I always go on. I just type it in. I think it's Libsyn or something like that is
Okay.
what usually comes up on mine. But I think it's on iHeartRadio and other podcast
Neat.
places.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
really cool. So I always like to end the podcast by asking for a book recommendation. What's a book that you've read that you've really enjoyed and you enjoy telling people about?
I can see it sitting on my desk, but I actually can't think of the title. And it was actually one that Governor Burgum gave us as new cabinet members. And it's I cannot think of it right now, but it's telling the story through numbers and being able to really.
Oh shoot! Yes, we
mean,
have a book club kit with that book.
Really where it hits home for me, and I'm sorry that I can't remember it, but it's really because prisons are so weird and we're so abnormal that when we try to tell the story, 28 years of being inside these places or working with the field services, is that as I start to tell the story, you can see this blank look, right? And so that book has helped me try to find that path of saying, here's the numbers, here's what it is, but trying to correlate it with real life experiences, not weird experiences like I've spent most of my life.
Making Numbers Count is the title of it.
Yes. Yep.
So
That's it.
that's what it is. Awesome. Yeah. Well, and I think probably one of the other challenges is like I'm a Law and Order SVU junkie, right? So clearly I know everything about your field because I watch Law and Order SVU. I would imagine that's something that your team comes up against often, though, because there's all these, police shows out there, whether it's Law and Order or reality TV like Cops.
Yeah.
And those really aren't anything like your real life.
Correct. Yep. And very much so. And it's so our Rough Rider Industries director, Rick Gardner, and I talk about this quite a bit because we both came into this work thinking, hard work is what I believe that my family instilled in me, and I believe that, so that's all we need. As long as people just learn to work hard, then somehow that's just going to change life. And he does a much better job at explaining it than me, but I think that's the piece that gets lost in all of this, is that we have to reach people where they're at, and we make sure that we build them up. And it's hard because no matter what, I want to make sure that the accountability happens. And really that's what going to prison's about, is being held accountable. That's what going on probation is about. Then the rest of it is that's the actual hard work. I laugh and often say that it's probably the hardest job that you will ever have, trying to help people make change at a point where they don't really want to.
Right. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so, yeah.
Colby, thank you so much for talking to us today. I've learned so much about your agency, and I actually had the opportunity several years ago to spend a day with your prior librarian at NDYCC, North Dakota Youth Correctional Center.
Yep.
Is that what the other C is?
Got it.
And it was fascinating learning that, they do all the regular library stuff, but there's another layer on top because they're dealing with people who are in prison or jail. And it was a really fascinating opportunity. And so I would encourage our listeners to take advantage of the invitation that you issued to not let the walls keep us out. But it was wonderful to spend so much time learning today about your agency. You guys are doing wonderful work. And we'll have to talk about ways that our agencies can support each other and work together. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and I look forward to a future episode.